Came up with a theory yesterday, actually, a brand new one, about the VW scandal. I think I may have figured it out, or at least I think I may have a little bit of insight to help us understand what the heck happened with VW. Hey, happy Friday. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. Nice rainy day for us, isn't it? And that's not a bad thing. You see, I'm getting tired of all the negativity that we have. You know, I'm news director here at Hot News Talk Radio, so I'm way too familiar with all the negativity that's been floating around. And I'm way too familiar with all the violence and all the drugs and all the different bad things that have been going on in our city. And you know what? That's something that happens in every city. And Chattanooga is not a particularly bad city. In fact, I think it's a really great city. And you probably agree, because we all like where we live, right? I mean, Chattanooga is a great city. And I think we sometimes take it for granted just how great Chattanooga is. And one of the cool things that we have here, of course, is VW. And that's brought a lot of jobs to the area, cool cars. You know, you can't really can't go wrong with VW. So there's not a whole lot of arguing against the existence of the plant. And yes, it brought a lot of jobs. Perhaps the money is going out internationally. That's a whole other argument. But people are employed by VW. So I'm not going to go on a VW bashing tirade, not because I am particularly biased towards their cars, because I don't have any plans to buy one. I don't find VW cars to be particularly interesting. I really am not interested in buying one. So I don't have any monetary interest in Volkswagen. I'm not employed by Volkswagen either. If I were, I would be wearing much nicer clothes than I am now. So don't have any financial stake in Volkswagen. But I figured out something, or at least I think I figured out something that might be of interest. Now, this was called to my attention too when I was sort of discussing this theory with somebody else here at the station. Is technical glitches happen, right? Technical glitches are something that happens to everyone. Heaven knows we have them here. Mostly they're my fault, but we we have technical glitches here at radio stations, and TV stations have them where there's a prolonged sort of a pregnant silence that there's really not supposed to be there. And the reporters sort of look confused, and they look at the camera and they say, well, obviously the reporter is not here. Moving on to other news, you know, and that happens to every station. That happens everywhere. So we all know mistakes happen. Technical glitches happen. They occur. That's just how it is. Well, I thought, what about VW? Now, we're looking at the whole VW problem over at Volkswagen, and of course, Martin Winterkorn has stepped down as the CEO over there, and lots of bad things have been happening over there. Now, I realized the problem that Volkswagen had was you would plug into, the EPA would plug into the computer on these Passats or whatever vehicle it is that's affected. It's quite a big line, several million of them has been affected. They would plug into the computer, and they discovered, I don't know how, but they discovered that the emissions controls would only get turned on when a device was plugged in, or at least when an EPA diagnostics device was plugged into the Volkswagen car computer. Now, that sounds pretty nefarious, doesn't it? But wait a minute. There is a legitimate diagnostic reason to do that. What if the reason was, you know, we'll plug it into the computer and it'll turn on the EPA controls. But other than that, there are no diagnostic controls or anything like that for the emissions standards testing, whatever, on these Volkswagen cars. Now, the reason for that would be to test how the cars perform without these diagnostic, or rather without these emissions controls, how they're going to act, the difference perhaps in performance between with it on and with it off. There's a lot of reasons why you would turn off these environmental protection controls. There's a lot of reasons why you would do that. Now, the funny thing is, what if they just forgot to turn them back on when the car came to release? Now, this happens a lot in, say, the computer industry, with especially video games, where some things are a little bit buggy. Now, the thing is, you can't just roll out a bug fix with cars. I mean, yeah, there was a problem that we had with some of the GM cars and the Ford cars where there was a exploit for the self-driving systems and all these sorts of things. It's pretty bad. But there's not really any fix for cars, really. When you send out a bug fix for cars, generally speaking, you have to have them all come back to the dealership and have it all fixed. And the problem that came about with this particular bug was it's in violation of EPA standards, and that's kind of carrying a huge fine, which means VW now has to pay like billions of dollars in recalls and in fines to the EPA and all sorts of things. And what if it was just an error made by one of the VW engineers? The possibility is certainly there that somebody just made a mistake and is not owning up to it over in Volkswagen engineering. Somebody said, "Oh man, I forgot to turn that flag back off where it disables the EPA emissions control standards." And don't forget too that this is technically in violation of European Union regulations too. So it's not like it's just the EPA. This is affecting the European Union too. So Volkswagen really has no incentive to be in violation of these controls. After all, I don't think they have been in the past. So there's not really any incentive there. So a mistake is pretty likely, actually, when you look at it on its face. It's actually kind of likely that a technical glitch is the problem here. And I would be immensely surprised to discover that someone was intentionally causing this problem. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, the investigation's not complete. Volkswagen's still doing an internal investigation. There's probably going to be some sort of EPA, big difference, EPA investigation. So we'll have to wait and see. But that's my theory, is that it's due to a technical mistake. And it makes me wonder, if that is indeed the case, is anyone going to actually be fired for it? Obviously, the CEO stepped down, claiming that he didn't know anything about this and he is not at fault for anything. I don't know if that's true or not. I have no reason to doubt it, but we don't know at this point. We don't know the whole story behind the Volkswagen thing. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of op-eds posted. There's going to be a lot of criticism. There's going to be a lot of skepticism. But as it is now, we don't know the whole story, and we have to proceed under that assumption, is we don't know everything that happened with VW. There's going to be a lot of criticisms on Facebook, obviously, and Twitter, but we do not know everything that's happening at Volkswagen. That has to be kept in mind before you throw blame. Before you cast the first stone, we'll say, we have to know the whole story. And so far, we don't, because remember, this is a big corporate entity we're talking about, a big international corporate entity we're talking about, with different offices in different locations, where each and every person who's involved in engineering has to be interviewed and has to, we have to find out who coded the programs for these computers inside these Volkswagen cars. Was it an outside contractor? Because that leads to a whole other problem. We do not know. There's a lot that needs to be found out. So we'll keep you updated on that right here on Hot News Talk Radio. Certainly, I'll be talking about it on Digital Drive, which is what you're hearing now. Up next, by the way, is Clutch with Keon Rose. He's on from 1 to 2 right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and also on hotnewstalkradio.com. By the way, this is just coming out of Congress. John Boehner is going to be resigning from his position of Speaker of the House in October. So we're not sure why. We really don't know why that's happening. Why is John Boehner resigning? We're not sure. Kind of a weird, sudden decision, especially since he announced it while the Pope was in town. Yeah, kind of weird, especially considering that John Boehner himself is, I do believe, a Catholic. And so this whole thing coming out, and maybe the Pope told him to resign? No idea. We'll have to find out when there's some sort of memoir written by John Boehner, and then maybe sometime we'll find out what in the world is going on with John Boehner. Very mysterious person, John Boehner. He sort of gives that facade of being very transparent, but really he's sort of mysterious. We don't know a whole lot about John Boehner, and I don't know if we ever will know a whole lot about John Boehner, other than he's a very emotional sort of guy. Are you familiar with the GCHQ? That's the something or another. It's the Government Communications Headquarters is the GCHQ, and it's a United Kingdom's intelligence agency. It's sort of the sister agency to the NSA. Think of it as the partner agency to the NSA. It's sort of like the European wing of the NSA, although I think people in the UK would be a little bit offended if you accuse them of being part of Europe. Well, anyway, the GCHQ apparently, according to Ars Technica anyway, tried to track the web visits of every visible user on the internet. Now, that's a pretty huge margin there. So according to Ars Technica, if you've used the World Wide Web anytime after the year 2007, which would be everyone, the United Kingdom's Government Communications Headquarters probably spied on you. That's the revelation contained in documents published today by The Intercept, which detail a GCHQ operation called Karma Police, a program that tracked web browsing habits of people around the globe, and what the agency itself billed as the world's biggest internet data mining operation, intended to eventually track every visible user on the internet. Karma Police, apparently named after the Radiohead song, oddly enough, started as a program to track individuals listening to internet streaming audio radio stations, although they're not really radio stations. They just sort of call themselves that in a sort of a throwback, I guess, as part of a research project into how radicals might misuse internet radio to spread their message. Now, there's not really anyone who can tell you how to use internet radio because it's internet radio. So there's not really any proper usage for internet radio. No one can tell you how to use internet radio because it's internet radio. So there's no one to tell you how to do that. So that being the case, there's not really any misuse of internet radio, just as there's no misuse of, say, speech. There's no one to tell you that this is free speech and this is not. There's no one to tell you that this is how you can say things. There's really not any sort of agency to determine that. Now they might try to, but all speech is free speech, really. So there's, aside from hate speech or whatever, but pretty much it's all protected. There's not anyone to tell you that you can't say this on the internet, because you can say whatever you want on the internet. That's just how it is. So there's not any misuse of internet radio is the point. Listeners to streams that included Islamic religious content were targeted for more data collection in an effort to identify their Skype and social media accounts. The program gradually grew with its success. I don't know what the success was, just like we found out who they were. According to GCHQ documents, by 2009, the program had stored over 1.1 trillion events, which are web browsing sessions, in its black hole database. Black hole, I assume, is because it sucks in all data, any and all information. By 2010, the system was had gathered 30 billion records every day of internet traffic metadata. According to another GCHQ document, that volume grew to 50 billion per day by 2012. Now, is that legal, would be the question. Well, kind of no, is the answer. It's really not illegal. There's nothing, really, it's not legal, I should say. There's nothing legal about what's going on at the GCHQ. Really, they're only getting away with it because there's no one to enforce the law. And that's something that needs to be addressed too. Think about it this way. If you're the head of, say, the FBI, and it comes out that your agency or someone in your agency or some rogue aspect of your agency is spying on a bunch of people, are you going to be arrested? Probably not. Even though you signed off on these documents, is really anyone going to be arrested for these violations? The answer is, well, no. Probably nobody's going to be arrested. Nothing's going to happen. It turns out that, say, the NSA is spying on a bunch of people. Is anything going to happen? No. Well, actually, it did turn out that the NSA spied on a bunch of people and is still spying on a bunch of people, and nothing's coming of it. In fact, we are pretty well aware that at least George Bush and probably President Obama knew about what's going on within the NSA. Because, again, these initiatives were launched under Bush. So there is that to contend with. And again, I'm by no means am I a fan of any president. I don't like any of them. And that includes everyone. I don't like any president, period, because I'm fundamentally opposed to one person being a ruler of a country. So I don't like any president. Yes, that includes that one that you like. I don't like any of them. So I really have no bias towards any particular one. Like, quit beating up on LBJ. Don't beat up on Reagan. I don't like any of them. So I'm sort of, I guess, unbiased in that regard. I'm not a fan of any of them. Certainly, some did some things better than others, but again, I don't like the idea of one singular person ruling a country, so I don't like any president. It's just how it is. It's how it be. There's no way to get around it. But anyway, if it turns out that, say, your agency is spying on a ton of people, like is true with the NSA, you're not going to be fired. There's not really any firing you. Chances are you've been appointed anyway, so there's not any getting rid of you. There's no unelecting you. Like, say, if it turned out that a sheriff was conducting really illegal spying operations on every single person in, let's say, just as an example, Hamilton County. Now, I'm not saying that that's happening, but as a theoretical, that sheriff would probably be elected out of office next time they came around. In fact, impeached is an option too, recalled. But that's really not going to happen with somebody who's the head of an organization that's appointed. There's no getting rid of him. Now, by proxy, you might be able to get rid of, say, a police chief by unelecting a mayor. But other than that, or recalling a mayor, demanding that the police chief resign or whatever. But he could just say no, and the mayor could say, I'm not going to unappoint him. The next guy you elect says, I think the mayor or I think the police chief has been doing a really good job, and all these things. There's not really any doing anything about it legally anyway. So not a whole lot's going to happen here. So that's the problem that we have now. Not a whole lot is going to happen in terms of, say, stopping the NSA from doing all these things. There's not. It has to be a natural process that continues to move along, where people are going to realize that these heads of agencies are really not doing any good, and presidents are really not doing any good. Mayors are really not doing a whole lot of good. And so eventually people will become very disenfranchised with the whole idea of it, and we'll realize that rejection of that whole process is the best way to go about things. But that's far in the future, at least probably far in the future. Well, with the GCHQ, again, and that's in the UK, the Karma Police system and its black hole database log the IP addresses of individuals visiting internet websites. What kind of website is there? As well as cookies associated with their web traffic. The users of specific sites can then be profiled by correlating recorded cookies from other sites. Now, cookies sounds like a really stupid thing, and it kind of is. But cookies are perhaps, I don't know. It's information that's stored on your computer that's linked to a website you would access. So, like, say, saved passwords, user information, like, say, your preferences. That would be cookies. It's a cookie crumb trail, right? You're familiar with that breadcrumb trail, cookies, whatever. You need to have cookies, is what I'm saying. Everybody likes them, except for me. The users of specific sites can then be profiled based on these cookies, like, say, Google's preferences, which is a big thing. Like, say, what are your search preferences? Well, that's stored on your machine, and that's just how it is. That's just the nature of it. So there's not really any getting around that either. All this information is stored on your computer or on a remote server and can then be accessed by the GCHQ. Whether that be legal or not doesn't really matter. And that's a big, big deal, because this is not just an issue that affects, say, the UK. This is an issue that affects everyone who's used the internet since apparently the year 2007. So yeah, what are we going to do about it? Well, there's not much we can do about it, at least not legally, or I should say not within the legal system. What we can do is we can attempt to obfuscate our trail, sure, not because we have anything to hide, not because we're doing anything illegal or whatever, simply as a matter of principle that I don't want my information to be stored, thus I'm not going to allow my information to be tracked. And that's just the nature of it. That's just how I'm going to conduct things. So how do you do that? Well, Tor is kind of a little bit out of the question, because it doesn't appear that Tor is actually doing a very good job of keeping our secrets. Tor is an option, but again, Tor is probably pretty well infiltrated by now. So there are alternative methods, like, say, free and open source messaging, like Tox, TOX is one option. There are other options. iMessage is supposed to be encrypted, although I don't know how well, because again, it's closed source. So it's interesting to see, though, how people are becoming increasingly aware of all these things. Can you imagine if it broke in the 1980s that the government was wiretapping every single person's phone? I wonder how people would react, because there's no way to tell, really. There's no way to tell how well people would react. There's not really any metric for that. We know that people responded with outrage following the NSA revelations from Edward Snowden, but really political reforms haven't happened. There's not been any sort of revision that's occurred that's really meaningful, except for one thing called the Snowden Treaty that's coming out. Is it going to do any good? Probably not. The Snowden Treaty has been proposed, and it's going to supposedly attempt to curtail mass surveillance and protect whistleblowers, but that's highly unlikely, because too much money is being made for contractors like Edward Snowden. He was an individual contractor, and too much money is being made by the government, and too much information is being collected from these different programs for them to just disappear. Can you imagine if tomorrow it's ruled that, say, collection of user information for marketing purposes is illegal? Well, nothing would happen really to stop it from happening. Like, let's say it's been ruled that NSA bulk metadata collection has been ruled to be illegal, which actually it has been. Nothing changes. Nothing's going to change. It's going to keep happening. The only reason that we know about the NSA surveillance is because Snowden leaked it anyway. If he didn't, then we would keep on continuing to think that nothing bad was happening with the NSA. The NSA would just be yet another three-letter agency that's doing mysterious, possibly nefarious things, and that would be it. That would be the extent of it. And there's not really any telling how it's going to continue from here. What's going to be the political backlash? Is there going to be any political backlash? It seems the Republicans are very much in favor of NSA spying anyway, and so are the Democrats. So not a whole lot of change is going to happen from the political parties. So what's going to happen? There's not really been any sort of answer to that. I haven't seen any major political candidate except for Rand Paul. And again, I'm not campaigning for him, but he has at least said something about it. What's going to happen? We don't know.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Soddy Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Soddy Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Soddy Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Soddy, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. My guest this week is former Congresswoman and candidate for the presidency, Miss Michelle Bachmann, who'll be here to talk about just how big a role beliefs play in forging public policy. Don't miss the always controversial Michelle Bachmann this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report on AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
Al Gore running is crazy. You're flying around in your private jet all over the world, and you want average Americans to care about the environment. Don't you think you should be doing your part as well?
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Hot News Talk 1240.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Lillian Wu. House Speaker John Boehner stunning many in Washington with his announcement he'll step down as House Speaker and give up his seat. Presidential hopeful Ted Cruz reacting.
Every election, politicians promise to fight for conservative principles. And then the day after the election, they come to Washington and they don't fight for any of the principles they said they would fight for.
GOP leader Mitch McConnell praising Boehner as an ally and a friend. The Ground Zero Museum gets its first visit from a pope who leads an interfaith service.
It's about 500 to 600 persons, multi-religious. There'll be Hindu prayers, Buddhist prayers, Sikh prayers, the invocations by a Jewish rabbi and Muslim imam. So this is a time where he is trying to spread this message of peace. After coming from the UN, it's very appropriate that he's going to spread this message of peace at this very horrific site.
Fox religion correspondent Lauren Green, Fox News. We report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
Well, messages of peace are a good thing, I guess, but are they effective in practice? Well, I'm not going to get into the religious argument because, well, I mean, I could, but you'd probably want to stone me afterwards, and I'd probably want to be stoned afterwards, so, ooh, that's a double one. So, no, religion's not really my forte. I mean, I know where I stand on religion, but I don't really want to get into it on radio. That's not really my thing. Well, this is Digital Drive. Happy Friday, by the way. Happy end of the week. Now, funny, in my job, I don't really look forward to the end of the week. I mean, I look forward to the weekend, but I don't look forward to not doing my job anymore because I love what I do. So I don't really say, man, I can't wait to go home. That's not me. I like what I do, so I don't really experience that. But I do enjoy my weekends. I'm just not somebody who is chomping at the bit to get out of the office because sometimes I stay here later than I'm meant to, I guess, just because I enjoy what I do and I have no problem staying later than usual to get the job done. So I don't know. That's just me, though. I'm not a particularly super motivated person either. I just really like what I do, and that's what motivates me. So I don't know. Anyway, no, the message of a peace thing is kind of funny, but we can apply that politically too, and that's where I'm much more effective at talking because religion is something that I know about, and it's something that I'm involved in. But when it comes to religion, trying to convince somebody of your religious position on radio especially is really not very effective. So we'll shy away from that one. Because especially here, even at the radio station, we have people who think differently religiously, and that's okay because something that binds us together is our political position and our ideals. And that's what binds us together, much, much less so than religion perhaps. But well, anyway, we'll get into that some other time. The whole message of peace thing is kind of funny, though, when we talk about political parties, because neither party is really interested in peace, because it couldn't be. There's too much money to be made from war. So obviously, peace is not something that anyone is really interested in the political parties. Think about it this way, too. Why do we even have political parties? I mean, seriously, answer the question. Why do we have political parties? Now, I'm not putting you on the hot seat. Somebody else can do that. But no, really, the answer to the question is because there's money to be made from the political parties. Think about it this way, especially in the days of crowdfunding, which we have now, there's especially not a whole lot of reason to have a political party. Now, it used to be that you could use a political party as sort of a metric for how somebody would think what their political position was, but that's really not very accurate anymore because there's not a whole lot of difference between the Republicans and between the Democrats. There might be a few small issues that they differ on, but when it comes down to it, there's not a whole lot of difference. Now, somebody who's perhaps a little bit older than me might say, oh, but how dare you? They're a lot different. Well, that may have been true, say, in the 80s, 70s, maybe even the 90s, but it's become very homogenized nowadays. There's not a whole lot of difference. So that's just how it is. That's just the nature of things. That's how it be. They don't think that it be that way, but it do. So there's not a whole lot of getting away from that. We're especially seeing that when it comes to surveillance, because we're seeing people on both sides of the aisle, particularly Dianne Feinstein and people such as John McCain, who are, Dianne Feinstein is a Democrat, very prominent Democrat, and John McCain's a very prominent Republican, and I'm not a fan of either one. I don't like anyone in either party, so that's just how I am. I don't like either party. I think they're useless, they're ineffective, they don't get the job done, and the job really can't get done. When we're talking about the political process. In America's political process, the job can't get done. That's just the nature of it. That's just how it is. There's not any getting away from that. The job can get done outside of the whole election political process, but within it, not a whole lot can get done. That's just the nature of it. But anyway, no, I think that the job can get done, whatever job that might be, whatever you're looking to get done, outside of the political system. And we see that with, say, activists who are actually working to solve problems on a technical side, where we see privacy tools being put in place. Great example. the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Now, I don't want to be an advocate for the EFF, although I have been interested in it. I'm not a member. I haven't given money to the EFF. So just full disclosure there. I'm not involved in it. I'm interested in it. I'm not a member and I'm not a donator. So full disclosure there. So I'm clear of that. But I have reported on stories. I think sometimes they do a pretty good job on things. But other than that, no involvement. But the EFF has put out different tools for Firefox and Chrome that allow you to know what sites are tracking you. You can look that up on EFF.org. I think the EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, does a pretty good job on reporting on privacy issues. But aside from that, I'm not really involved. That's just how it is. But again, that's getting done without any sort of political help. There's not any candidate backing that. There's no one backing that. But it's getting done. And I think if we realize that we don't actually need any sort of political help to get our jobs done, we'll be a lot better off. If we act independently instead of acting within a political group, we'll be a whole lot better off. If we say, I want to defeat online spying. Okay, cool. Do it. You don't need any sort of political help. You don't need permission. We know it's illegal, so defeat it. Come out with a tool that's going to defeat online spying. And there you go. Well, forcing suspects to reveal phone passwords is unconstitutional, according to a court. The Fifth Amendment, of course, is the right against compelled self-incrimination that would be breached if two insider trading suspects were forced to turn over the passcodes of their locked mobile phones to the Securities and Exchange Commission, a federal judge has ruled on Wednesday. Now, on the face of it, this may seem like a pretty major defeat for people who are advocates against insider trading. But this is a major win for those of us who are privacy advocates too. So the legal process sometimes and definitely should be separate from the legal, or rather from the political process, but often it's really not. There's political pressure on Supreme Court justices, especially. Look at John Roberts making some really odd decisions, even though politically he should be opposed to them, even though really he's not. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. We find, as the SEC is not seeking business records, but defendants' personal thought process, defendants may properly invoke their Fifth Amendment rights. The U.S. District Judge Mark Kearney of Pennsylvania wrote. So the decision comes amid a growing global debate about encryption and whether the tech sector should build back doors into their wares to grant the authorities to access locked devices. Now, I'm putting authorities in finger quotes there because where does their authority come from? Where does the authority of, say, a cop come from? Where does the authority of, say, a sheriff come from? Well, the sheriff, that's common law. We can answer that one pretty quickly. But a police chief, as an example. The authority of a police chief comes actually from the city, not from a county, not from the feds, but usually from the city. They're there to enforce statute, not necessarily to protect your rights, but to enforce statute. That's something that has to be understood. Now, the same thing comes with, say, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC is only there to ensure that the businesses are operating in a legal manner. That's all the SEC is there for. Generally, you see the SEC associated with Wall Street, but that's about it. And beyond that, there's no power. And the same comes with, say, a policeman. If a policeman gives you an unlawful order, you don't have to follow it. That's just how it is. He has no authority to compel you to give up information either. A policeman or a sheriff or a sheriff's deputy or an FBI agent or a member of the NSA or even the president himself, even the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, whoever that might be, does not have the power to compel you to give up information. He can't, because the Fifth Amendment prevents him from doing that. So where does the authority come from when they use the word authorities? If it doesn't come from the Constitution, I don't really care about it. If the authority here does not come from Constitution, it is in fact invalid. Well, this decision comes amid a growing global debate about encryption and whether the tech sector should build backdoors into their wares. I, of course, posit they shouldn't, and legally there's no obligation to. Without this capability, authorities are trying to get suspects to cough up their passwords instead, usually by coercion, of course. The Supreme Court has never ruled on the constitutionality of the issue, oddly enough. There has been a smattering of varying court rulings nationwide on the topic. Back in 2012, a federal appeals court said that forcing a child pornography suspect to decrypt a password-protected hard drive would actually amount to a Fifth Amendment violation. You can't force him to do that. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Well, think about it this way too. If I get, say, stopped on a traffic stop, I've been stopped from a traffic stop. That happens all the time. It's happened to me. It could happen to you. Probably has happened to you. And say the policeman out of nowhere, and this is a theoretical situation, I doubt it would happen, but it could, out of nowhere says, we need your phone because you could be someone who we're looking for, a fugitive, and we need to check your phone to make sure you're not. I don't know why they would do that, but let's just assume that that would be the situation. And I say, here's my phone because I'm an idiot. And I say, here's my phone. I don't know that I don't have to give it to them. So they get my phone and, there's a password, or at least in this case, a passcode, because a password would include, letters. A passcode includes numerals. That's just how it is. So I hand them over my phone and I say, we need your passcode. And I say, too bad, not giving it to you. I'm not being compelled. I will not be compelled to give up my passcode. And that's just how it is. I'm not going to give it to you. I don't have to. Fifth Amendment clearly states that. I do not have to give up my passcode, and I'm not going to. And there's nothing they can do about that. And that's cool because that's a protection against the so-called authorities. That's our protection against the legal process. And that in and of itself is part of the legal process because the Fifth Amendment is, in fact, believe it or not, legal. They have to abide by that. So I cannot be compelled to give up my information. You can beat me up, you can rough me up, but I'm not going to give you my passcode. Good luck with that, buddy. In the latest case, the SEC is investigating 2 former Capital One data analysts who allegedly used insider information associated with their jobs to trade stocks. In this case, a $150,000 investment allegedly turned into $2.8 million. That's pretty substantial. Of course, these are all allegations. Regulators suspect, again, allegations, the mobile devices are holding evidence of insider trading and demanded that the two turn over their passcodes. The defendants balked at supplying their passcodes, saying the Fifth Amendment protected them. And they're right. The judge agreed and said that the government was going on a fishing expedition. So they're not going to give over their passcodes, and they have no legal obligation to do so because this is a private matter, not a public matter, and not a business matter either, because these two are being privately accused as individuals. It's not, say, Capital One that's being accused, and that would be a whole nother topic, but it's these two individuals who are being accused, and thus, as individuals, they have Fifth Amendment rights and don't have to give up their passcodes to anyone. You cannot compel me to do anything. I will not be compelled. Think about it that way. You can't be compelled to do anything. That's kind of funny, isn't it? You can't be compelled to do anything. You don't have to really do anything. You can't be arrested for not doing something, generally speaking. Now, you can, say, be ticketed or fined for failure to present a driver's license. That is a real thing. Unfortunately, that's a real thing. You can be, say, ticketed for criminal negligence, which would be, again, not doing something, but again, willfully not doing something. And it should be pointed out that I'm not a lawyer. Not a liar, not a lawyer. I'm not somebody who's going to give you legal advice, but this is my understanding of it. You don't have to give up any information, especially when it comes to your passcode on your phone. You don't have to give up that info. Even if the cop says, we know about your family, we know about everything, you have to give up this passcode, you may as well do it anyway because we know everything. Well, sorry, I'm not going to do that. That is simply not going to happen. Sorry, guys. Well, Oren Kerr, who's a constitutional scholar and former federal prosecutor, not anymore, suggested that the Fifth Amendment issues raised by the content of the passcode could be addressed by having the defendants just enter their passcodes rather than handing them over to the government. Kerr added, having the defendant enter in his passcode would minimize the Fifth Amendment implications of the compelled compliance, as it would not involve disclosing the potentially incriminating evidence of the passcode itself. So what they're saying is, we don't need to know what the passcode is. We just want you to enter it in so that we can see what's on your phone. And again, you can decline to do that. You can't be compelled to do that because that's giving up information. That's not giving up physical evidence, like, say, a fingerprint might be construed to be. That's giving up a mental object, something that exists only in your mind and only as a mathematical object, only as numbers on a screen, only as code in a computer, or in this case on your phone. You don't have to give that up. And that's something that needs to be known. Everybody needs to know that. You do not have to give up your passcode. That's just how it is, and there's not really any getting around that for the cops. As much as they would like to, as much as the SEC would like it, as much as maybe they should, they don't have to. This story here, further, and this is a separate story, by the way, this story here really puts a spotlight on something that I really like to point out, which is the uselessness and the lack of power which a president holds. And that's every president. That's not going on an anti-Obama or anti-Democrat tirade. This is just how it is with every president, if he's Ronald Reagan or if he's Richard Nixon. That's just how it is. Well, if elected president, Jeb Bush says that he will get rid of net neutrality rules. How? Really, how does he plan to do that? They make promises all the time, and very rarely can they make good on them. How does Jeb Bush plan to get rid of net neutrality? Executive order? I thought that was something they were trying to fight against, was executive power. So why? How does he plan to do that? Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush today pledged, or rather this is a few days ago, this was in September 22nd, to repeal or reform, he says, the most onerous Obama rules and regulations, which again is not true. It's not an Obama rule or regulation. As much as I don't like Obama, it's not an Obama thing. It's a FCC thing. So the president has really not a whole lot to do with it. Obama could himself personally say, I don't think net neutrality is a good idea. Don't do it, guys. And the FCC could still rule exactly the same thing that they ruled, or it ruled. So the president doesn't have a whole lot to do with this one. The Federal Communications Commission's net neutrality rule classifies all ISPs, or internet service providers, as public utilities, subjecting them to antiquated common carrier regulation, Bush's team wrote in a post titled The Regulatory Crisis in Washington. Now, whether or not you agree that net neutrality is a good thing or a bad thing, it still is not really up for debate that the president doesn't have the power to get rid of it. And the president doesn't have the power to enact it either. Executive order is not really a legit thing when it comes to the FCC regulations. Nothing can really be done about that. So what does Jeb Bush plan to do? That's something that needs to be addressed, though, is that the president doesn't have the power to, say, build a wall. He doesn't, and that's good. See, that's the good thing about presidencies, is even if you have the most evil guy ever elected president, and some might argue that we already have that, I would disagree, but whatever. Even if you have the most evil guy ever elected president, he doesn't have a whole lot of power, and that's great. Executive power isn't really that great. It's not really that great in the sense it's big and huge. There's not a whole lot of executive power going on here, and that's good. That's great, because I don't want a strong leader. I want a really weak leader, because I want myself to be my leader. I am my own leader. Now, sure, there's church arguments, and that's good, and that's fine. There's arguments of contract, your boss, and that's good, and that's fine. But when it comes to governmental things, I don't want a strong leader. I don't want someone compelling me to do things or attempting to compel me to do things. I don't want a strong mayor. I don't want a strong, maybe I do want a strong sheriff in some regards, but I don't want a strong president. I don't want strong congressmen. I don't want a strong leader, because that minimizes me. That minimizes you. That minimizes us as a populace to have strong leaders. That's putting power into the hands of an individual, and that really shouldn't be there. The only individual power should be our individual power, not the power of some guy in some office who some people elected. I had no say in President Obama being president. I didn't. I wasn't old enough to vote when he was elected. Now, I could again vote against him, and maybe I would have in the 2012 and 2008 elections, but it wouldn't really make any difference, would it? He'd still be president, probably anyway. I don't think one vote would swing it, so he'd still be president. And I would still disagree with him. That's the tyranny of the 51%. And the 49 are kind of left out. That's just democracy. And democracy is, depending on who you ask, kind of broken, actually, because, again, that's the tyranny of the majority. Because you have a majority of people, and even if it's a slim majority, just by a small margin, these people are the majority. They pretty much get to make all the decisions, whether or not you agree with their decisions or not, whether or not you have a moral opposition to these people's decisions. Like, take me, for example. I'm against abortion. And yet I'm pro-life. And again, I don't have power when it comes to the decisions of people so-called in power. I can't just tell them, hey, guys, don't do it because I might vote against you. That doesn't really mean a whole lot to them, because they can buy votes. There's all sorts of ways they can stay in office. So we don't need to get into that, but we know it's true. So my saying, hey, guys, I don't like abortion is not going to really fix the problem, is it? That's not really going to do anything about it. And still, if I pay taxes, that money's still going to go towards Planned Parenthood. It's still going to go towards, say, aborted fetus research or what have you, or war, which is something I'm not in favor of either. Say the war in Iraq is something I'm fundamentally opposed to. The war in Afghanistan is something I'm fundamentally opposed to. A war in Iran would be something I would be fundamentally opposed to. And yet my tax dollars would go towards that, would go towards paying contractors to take out some dictator in Venezuela or wherever. And I'm not in favor of that. So I don't have a whole lot of individual power that's sort of been taken away from me by the feds. Or wait, do I? Because by not doing things, I hold a lot of power. By, say, not giving money to these people, I hold a whole lot of power. By saying I'm not going to engage in your political process, I actually am holding quite a bit of power there. So the individual has a lot more power than the individual may believe or may have been led to believe. That's the thing. We put way too much faith in congressmen, senators, especially the president. We put a whole lot of faith in these people when really they don't have a whole lot of power. Like, for instance, they say, we're going to stop the flow of immigration. How? Sheriffs can do that. Sure, if there was a sheriff, say, on a border state or in a border county, more appropriately, he could say, I'm going to set up a militia and we're going to stop, say, illegal immigrants from coming into this county. He could do that. But the president, say, setting up a border patrol is not really going to solve much of anything, and the president doesn't even have that power anyway. The border patrol is not even a legal entity. It's not even holding a whole lot of legal power. They don't even have arrest power half the time. It's more or less a federal paramilitary group more than anything. So that's good, though, that the president doesn't have that power. The sheriff does, and that's good because we can elect the sheriff in, and that's good. But the president does not have that power, nor should he. Well, Jeb Bush wants to make sure that internet service providers like, say, Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, whatever, are allowed to charge online content providers for access to their networks. But again, he can't do that. How is he going to do that? That's where Trump's argument falls flat. That's where every political candidate's argument falls flat. If elected president, I promise to do this or that. You don't have the power to do this or that. You can't really do anything. If elected president, I promise that ties will be cut off with Iran. Well, problem is, this is a P5+1 agreement, not a United States agreement. You don't have any say in it because other countries can still agree to trade with Iran and we might lose out. And well, anyway, plus worth noting is that most of our domestic oil input actually comes from Canada. We get most of our oil, our foreign oil, from Canada. So, hey, thanks, Canadians. We are very grateful for that. And so the Middle East is not our major supplier of oil, despite what you may believe. Actually, Canada is. So thanks, guys. It's much better to get oil from our friendly neighbors up north than the perhaps not so friendly people over in the Middle East. Not that every Middle Easterner, people living in the Mideast of Asia, is an angry and unreasonable person, but still, I'd rather not deal with corporate entities that are so far away. I'd much rather deal with the Canadians. So I have much better dealings and have a much better history with the Canadians than I do with Middle Easterners. So, oh well. Emburse is looking to help companies issue prepaid company debit cards on the fly. Kind of a cool idea. According to TechCrunch, not every employee, especially those at smaller businesses, can get a corporate credit card, but they still need to pay, say, company-related expenses, and that's where Emburse comes in. It's a startup that's now issuing prepaid cards to employees. That's kind of a neat idea. Maybe we'll get involved in that. I don't know, but I just thought that was kind of a cool, interesting thing. Also, scientists have gotten a new speed record, teleporting quantum data 60 miles now. Yet another step forward in quantum research. Quantum teleportation, actually. Teleportation is real. It's just on a quantum level. They've smashed the previous record by teleporting bits of information 60 miles over fiber cable. That's a solid 4-fold improvement over the previous record. Also, scientists have managed to get a guy to walk through direct deep brain stimulation, even though he has a spinal cord injury. Why am I mentioning all these things? Lots of leaps forward in technology. These are positive things, and believe it or not, they're not having a whole lot of help from government, which shows that maybe we don't actually need the state. Oh, that's a radical idea. Maybe we don't actually need the president. Maybe we don't actually need our congressman to move forward. That's a crazy idea. This is Digital Drive. Clutch with Keon Rose, our resident sports expert, is coming up next right here on News Talk Radio.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world.